Well, analyzing some major economic policies since 1999, let's start with the likes of Structural Adjustment Program and Economic Liberalization Era, 1999 to 2005. At our outset of Nigeria's Fourth Republic, the nation continued implementing the Structural Adjustment and Economic Liberalization Policy introduced in the 80s and early 90s. Away from that, it was Vision 2020. That was 2007 to 2019. Launched in 2009, the Vision 2020 was targeted at positioning Nigeria as one of the top 20 economies in the world by 2020, with a strategic focus on improving critical infrastructure, developing a vibrant and globally competitive economy, and enhancing human capital development. The strategy is sought to diversify the economy away from its heavy leanings on oil. Recent developments in 2019 to date, Nigeria's Agenda 2050, formulating policies and against the backdrop of several subsisting developmental challenges. Agenda 2050 is a perspective plan designed to take the country through an upper middle income country by 2050 and subsequently to the status of high income economy. President Bola Tinubu highlighted major achievements today with regards to the economy during his speech at the National Assembly. And some is about 400,000 young Nigerians to be empowered with the Consumer Credit Scheme, the Nigerian First policy. He talked about the tax reform, critical infrastructure projects being instituted by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, talking about our reserves also doing pretty well at this time. President Tinubu highlighted some of this. But let's get Mr. Johnson Chukwu on board to analyze some part of this speech. Mr. Johnson Chukwu is the founder and Group Chief Executive Officer of Cowrie Assets Management Limited. Mr. Chukwu, it's good to see you this afternoon, and thank you so much for your time. Happy Democracy Day to you.
Thank you, Tolu, for having me. Happy Democracy Day.
Yes, I think we should start with that speech, particularly looking at the high points where President Tinubu highlighted some major achievements of this administration. For me, the stability in our foreign exchange market, we've seen a bit of stability with our naira and the dollar. He mentioned that. We've also seen our net reserves doing better than what it used to be some months ago. And of course, our external reserves not doing badly. So if we look at all of this, yes, there are still challenges, I agree. But in your understanding as an economist and expert in this, the entire economic understanding and all of that, take us through what you make of those high points I highlighted.
Well, to really start from what has happened, what the government did in terms of economic policy pronouncements since it came into power.
Okay.
The first thing was to removal of petroleum subsidy. Second thing was the harmonization of exchange rates. Both of them, if you have followed my engagement with you, I had actually emphasized years back, and I've cried myself hawks. And several other analysts and economists have actually also been on the same direction that we needed to harmonize the exchange, we needed to take out the subsidy on petrol. Maybe how they were done, or the immediate impacts, we may all have a divergent opinion on that, but we all agree that it was absolutely necessary that we free the economy from subsidy payment, and we also, particularly consumption subsidy, that was not adding to productive activities in the country or adding directly. And we also said that we need to have a relatively single exchange rate to eliminate the abuses that were inherent in multiple exchange rates, where the government sells local foreign currency to some of its friends or some of its favored people, some of the favored people. So we are on the same page with that. Like I said, the unintended consequences of those actions and probably the style they were executed, we may have a divergence. I have a different opinion on how they should have been done to minimize the negative impact they had. But certainly we are bound to have negative impacts. In terms of economic restructuring, I don't think we've achieved much when you talk about economic restructuring, because if you look at the GDP structure, you will realize that agriculture still trump other sectors, followed by ICT sector, followed by trade sector, followed by manufacturing sector, followed by I think finance sector now, and then you have the oil and gas sector, and then you have the real estate sector, and down pecking order. So that structure has not changed much. The manufacturing sector in terms of performance is still under severe pressure. The agricultural sector is still under severe pressure. The president talked about that we are moving towards food, food independence. I think that's the desire of every Nigerian, that we must address the issue of food insecurity. But a lot still has to be done in terms of fighting the insecurity in major food base of the country, in terms of supporting multiple season, or at least 2 season farming in the country, in terms of improving the yield on cultivated land. So, but mainly I assume that those are still work in progress. The president talked about some of their hallmark decisions, including Nigeria First. I think that, like I said, that's a lofty, I've said this before, that's a very lofty idea that we should encourage Nigerians to patronize made in Nigerian good. But we have been on it since Babangida's era. If you remember, they were even sing songs then when Miriam Babangida of blessed memory was wearing Nigerian-made clothes, and the fashion industry in Sudlere and all the rest took off like wildfire. But unfortunately, we've not been able to sustain that. We've actually mounted this multiple times, but we've not been able to sustain that. So the president coming up with that is a lofty idea. The devil is in the details. So how we implement that is another factor, which hopefully the president has 2 years to really implement that. On the foreign reserve, the president said the foreign reserve has improved, yes, but we've also seen a lot of borrowing from what you call from foreign portfolio investors in terms of issuance of treasury bills and OMO instruments. Of course, increase in foreign reserve. Then the net foreign reserve, we also made allusion to that. But for you to have an enduring increase in net foreign reserve, you need to either increase your exports, which is actually what will give you an enduring balance. The president talked about the NEFOM, I think Nigerian Dedication Loan Scheme, which I think is commendable. So nobody will take away that those who are the most, those at the bottom of the rung of the ladder should still have access to credit to be able to go to school. He talked about the consumer, I think consumer credit that has been advanced to a number of people. I think he mentioned a reasonable number of people there. So in as much as I have not made those who have benefited from it, but I do not doubt that people, if they're able to borrow from government at subsidized rates, it will enhance, particularly if they invest those funds into things that are productive activities and not just consumption. He made reference that he's going to give additional loans to about 400,000 people, including youth corpers and all those things. Like I said, those loans, once they are properly monitored, once they are properly invested in productive activities, hopefully they will support the small and medium scale enterprises. We must make sure we do not fall into the same situation we found ourselves in the Anchor Borrower Program, where the ultimate beneficiaries of those loans, many of them could not pay back. I think the president talked about, I've spoken about the Nigeria First. Then he talked about the GDP growth rate. I think the people who wrote his speech made a mistake. And when they talked about the fourth quarter GDP growth was 4.6%, it was actually 3.84%. I agreed it's the highest we've had in the past 2 years of this administration, but it was 3.84%. But the figure of 3.4% for annual growth of last year was accurate. Then if you now look at the other thing, talked about stabilization of exchange rates, narrowing of the gap in the official exchange rate and the parallel market rate. Yes, we saw a very material narrowing up to the month of March this year. But unfortunately, because of the vulnerability of the economy, when Mr. Donald Trump came up with America Freedom Day or Liberation Day and imposed tariffs across the world, we saw it affected negatively our exchange rate, and we saw the gap open up again. I think as at now, I think I saw the figures that official exchange rate about 1,530 something naira as at the close of business yesterday, while as at the parallel market is still about over 1,600. So you have opened up a gap of about 70 naira again, but at some point it had narrowed. Let's hope they will continue to work. Of course, economic development and economic progress is a continuous job. It's not a snapshot. So let's hope the next 2 years they will continue to work. But I must give credit to what the central bank has done in terms of managing the monetary policies, particularly with respect to use of OMO instruments, use of treasury-based instruments to attract foreign portfolio investment into the economy to help stabilize the exchange rate to some extent. Finally, on that note, if you look at the capital importation in the past 2 years since the president came in, of course, we don't have the figure for first quarter of this year. But if you look at the capital importation for second and third and fourth quarter of 2023, and then up to the third quarter of up to September 2024, total capital importation was about 8.9 billion, total capital importation. And then the foreign direct investment flow, it was less than 500 million. And that is where the big work has to be done. These policies of the government must dovetail into attracting foreign capital. So because we do not have all the local capital that's enough to drive fast economic growth. And finally, the president made mention to that there's a plan, or they have developed a plan to ensure there's fiber optics across the whole country to encourage or to support digital services and the use of digital services, including data services, will help educational institutions and all those things. So I think that's a bit summary of a short summary of what the president referred to as it relates to the economic segment of his broadcast.
All right, then let's shift focus to talk about two things. One is about the fiber optics. That's to do with tech, you know, increasing internet access for Nigerians. I'm seeing a lot of positives around that space. That's one. Then also the tax reform, which we've talked about in recent times. And we expect that also to be signed into law anytime soon. Can we also share your thoughts around these two important developments?
Yeah, starting from the optic fiber or fiber optics, whatever what comes first. If you look at what is going, if you know what is going in, the now say that I think there's an advert that says data is blood now. Today, the most critical infrastructure globally is data, access to data. Just like electricity is very critical, so data is also critical. A number of Tolu, in the past, if you recall, I would have been in your studio having this conversation. That has saved me the commute time and the cost of fuel I would have taken from my house to your station, because there's data service. And today, a lot of Nigerians are running their businesses on the digital platforms, or the digital market, or the virtual market. A lot of, in fact, today, banking services has basically gone virtual. A lot of things we do today are dependent on availability of data. So if we have optic fiber across the entire length and breadth of the country, in all the nooks and crannies of this country, it will boost commercial activities. It will boost economic activities. It will boost social activities, and it will help improve our standard of living. In other countries, I've been to several countries where all the open parks, all the public parks, the government provide free data services, free internet services. So once you get there, you log in and do your thing. So if you don't have money in your house, or you're not able to pay for data, you just go to a public park and sit down there and do all your data service, all your data services. So that's as far as data has gone to in the world. Then on the legislations, I think the 4 pieces of legislation around the tax reforms, clearly, once this is signed into law and effectively implemented, it will help improve our tax system. Our tax system is, in terms of implementation, it's laden with a lot of booby traps. You realize that some of the things that the government had in the past had mounted about the tax reforms, we are harmonizing the taxes, we are not imposing additional taxes, we don't want to increase the burden. It is only when it's codified in law so that you and I can say, look, this is a breach of the law. You said you were not going to introduce new taxes, you introduce stamp duties on transactions that are not revenue earning, and then you take people's capital from, because they did the transaction with the bank. So they're not going to be in a position to challenge them. And most importantly, the government will realize that Some of the taxes that are introduced at the whims, sometimes of local government, sometimes at the state government, sometimes at the federal government, will no longer apply. So it's good we have some level of certainty, some level of modernization of our tax laws that will bring them in tandem with current best practices globally.
All right, then. It's getting more interesting. But despite all of this, you know, the outlook is what everyone is also talking about, that as we move on, it seems that things could be getting better and, you know, at least looking better than where they started from. What will be for you your projections for, say, short to medium and long term, considering where we are and the policies of government?
Okay, so let me ask you, what's your time frame for short, medium, and long term? Because your time frame will guide me.
Okay. At least for the first tenure of every administration is 4 years. So we have 2 years more for the first tenure of President Bola Tinubu. So looking at that, let's say in another 3 to 4 months, or before the end of 2025, short term, say mid-2026, towards the end of 2026, medium, then towards 2027, long term. Let's put it that way.
Okay, I will expand the time frame for long term to be like 10 years or thereabout. The short term, in terms of the short term, which is the next 2 years, unfortunately, the honest truth is that, and I think you should document this, not a lot will change. And I will tell you why. Some of the pressure points, some of the challenges we have, many of the challenges, not some of them, are structural in nature. I'll give you an instance. Let's start from the issue of food security or food insecurity, however you want to put it. Until we are able to arrest the insecurity in the part, first of all, in the middle belt, which is not central, and then the northwest and the northeast, we are not likely going to see material improvement in food production. We may decide, as we have done in recently, to start importing or expand our importation of food. But it doesn't give you, that's why I use the word food security, national food security, where your country can feed yourselves. We're not going to see those issues addressed in the next 2 years. If the government could make some gains, but in terms of restoring the citizens of those locations, those displaced citizens to going back to their farms and resume their cultivation, I don't think that may necessarily likely happen in the next 2 years. Then, in terms of exchange rates, a material appreciation of the exchange rate, unless government is able to borrow massively from the international market. Of course, I understand the government trying to borrow $5 billion from Saudi Aramco, or yes, from Saudi Aramco, and the government has the intention of borrowing about 21 billion. Unless those borrowings crystallize, in terms of maintaining strong local currency, it's still going to be a tough call. Because even in spite of the efforts of the government, crude oil production will non-materially improve in the next 2 years, because we have not seen so much of exploration. We're not seeing investment in the upstream sector to the extent that we should expect a 300,000, 500,000 increase in crude oil production. So if we are not able to achieve material improvement, I'm not saying there's not going to be some level of improvement. There could be some level of improvement with Seplatna assuming assets of Mobil, and with Oando's acquisition of, I think, Total also. We may see some improvement, but I do not see, unless you have a material improvement in the level of capital. And remember that oil and gas sector, oil exploration and production is not a short-term process. Even if you find oil, it could take you more than a year to start producing. So 2 years, if the 2 years is your timeline for short term, I don't see material improvement and foreign exchange earning, foreign reserve, exchange rates. What other sectors that you're looking at? So that leads us to, what do we think of inflation rate? I think inflation will gradually moderate, but I think we should still be contending with inflation rate in the region of 20% in the next 1 year. The simple reason is that food inflation is a major component of our consumer price index. So even if you see some level of deceleration in inflation rates, it's not going to be to the level of single digit. Maybe at best we see the region of 15% inflation rate. But bear in mind that inflation is additionally increment in average prices beyond what it was the previous year. So you are building on already a higher base. So that's as it relates to inflation rates. The way we talk about unemployment today, we do not have, that's my personal opinion, we don't have accurate figures on level of unemployment, because I find it difficult to be convinced that we have the same level of unemployment as a country like Germany, European Union, when we say our unemployment rate is about 4.2 or 4.3%. So, but ordinarily, between you and I, because our economy is growing at a much slower rate than the rate at which we are churning out graduates, or the proportion of our youthful population. So we're going to continue to bring into the labor market more numbers than those who are absorbed by the labor market. So we should expect some level of consistent higher level of unemployment. So I think I've wrapped around the short term. In terms of the medium term we'll begin to see if the government is consistent, if there are no counterbalancing measures that are taken because of political exigencies. And I repeat myself, if there are no counterbalancing measures that are taken because of political exigencies to have short wins that will have longer term disruptive impact, in the medium term, we should see some level of recovery. But I must emphasize that for us to have a buoyant economy where exchange rate will be strong, unemployment will be strong, the government must walk its talk as it relates to its emphasis on manufacturing, which the president made allusions to in his speech. That emphasis must be on manufacturing. That is the sector that will absorb a lot more hands than the service industry, given the demography of our population, which I had referenced earlier, that we are largely a youthful population. So people entering the labor market are quite high. Higher than the number of those who are exiting the Nigerian population to meet their forebearers. You know what I mean? I mean those who pass on to the to the next world. So these are facts. So in terms of in the medium term, in the long term, I think you and I should, in the course of this narrative we engage in regularly, encourage government to do the heavy lifting. Address the issue of critical infrastructure. I'm happy the government talked about data services, having optic fiber or fiber optics across the country. We need to address other critical infrastructure, particularly arterial high roads. The government needs to ensure that we have them. We need to stabilize and improve power supply. Energy supply is critical. We need to address the issue of port infrastructure. Is critical for import and export of goods. We need to improve the quality of education in terms of curriculum. The president made allusion to that the educational system is they're working to improve the quality of people coming into the labor market, the skills that are being trained. We need to make that a critical component of our economic development. And then we need to address our legal framework. Our legal system is a major setback. I was listening to former Governor Fashola this morning on the program organized by the church in Ilukweji. What's the name of the church? And he anchored his speech on rule of law. It has actually, unfortunately for us, it has actually collapsed. Our legal system has collapsed. And I hope the judges will pull back and ask themselves, do people still get justice from our legal system? The answer is no. Because they have a saying that justice denied is justice delayed is justice denied. We need to address our legal system.
Interesting conversation as always. I must thank you so much, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, for helping us understand President Bola Tinubu's speech there presented at the National Assembly, joint session of National Assembly today. Thank you so much. Mr. Johnson Chukwu is the founder, Group Chief Executive Officer, Cowrie Assets Management Limited. Do enjoy the rest of your day.